Welcome to Dreamscape Worlds. Tonight, let us leave behind the rush of the world and slip quietly into a story that breathes in the hush of the past. Let your mind drift softly, and let my voice be a gentle guide, a whisper that carries you through moments lost to time and dreams woven in the quiet folds of history. If you enjoy these sleepy journeys, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every small act of support helps keep these gentle worlds alive. Now, take a deep breath, close your eyes, and let the story begin.
Chapter 1: A Humble Start. Nintendo's birth in 1889. Our story begins in 1889 in the old capital of Kyoto, Japan. A city of winding streets and wooden houses, Kyoto was a place where tradition ran deep. Here, a craftsman named Fusajiro Yamauchi opened a small workshop to make Hanafuda playing cards, beautiful hand-painted decks used for games and quiet gambling nights. Back then, Hanafuda cards weren't flashy or mass-produced. They were pieces of art, painted with flowers, animals, and seasonal symbols. Made from mulberry bark, layered with paste and lacquer, they were built to last and to be treasured. Nintendo's first cards quickly found their way into local gambling halls and homes, where they became a part of everyday life in a country that prized games of chance. The name Nintendo translates loosely to "leave luck to heaven," a fitting idea for a company built around games of chance. At the start, Nintendo was small. Just a few workers, brushes and paints, and a dream to share a little joy and beauty through every deck they crafted. As the years rolled on, Japan itself was changing. The Meiji era saw railroads stretch across the islands and telegraphs connect cities. Western ideas poured in, mixing with centuries of tradition. But through all this change, Nintendo kept to its craft, painting cards by hand, carefully, for a growing customer base. By the early 1900s, Nintendo's reputation spread. The cards moved from Kyoto to other cities, carried in travelers' pockets and local game houses. The company expanded beyond Fusajiro's small workshop, adding more workers and a simple factory to keep up with demand. People loved the bright colors and sturdy cards, and Nintendo's name became known far outside the city's gates. When Fusajiro stepped down in the 1920s, the company passed to his son-in-law, Sekiryo Kaneda, who took the Yamauchi name as part of the family. Sekiryo wasn't just a craftsman, he was a businessman with an eye for opportunity. Under his watch, Nintendo streamlined production, opened new factories, and secured exclusive contracts with local gambling houses that depended on fresh decks. During these decades, the world outside Japan was growing more turbulent. Factories boomed, cars filled city streets, and radio brought distant voices into every home. Nintendo's cards, though humble, became a constant presence, stacked in corner bars, spread across tatami mats in smoky rooms, passed from hand to hand in games that carried on late into the night. The 1930s brought even more change. Sekiryo expanded Nintendo into Western-style playing cards to meet Japan's growing taste for imported games. This was a company willing to adapt while still holding to its roots, something that would define Nintendo for decades to come. But as the 1940s dawned, the clouds of war loomed. Japan shifted its focus to the Pacific conflict, and paper became scarce. Nintendo's business slowed as the war took resources and attention. Factories turned to wartime production, and the future of games seemed uncertain. Yet, even in those years, Nintendo survived. After the war, Japan was in ruins, but people still needed an escape. A little luck, a simple game to take their minds off the rubble. Nintendo's cards offered that moment of relief. The company picked up its tools, gathered workers, and began again. Cards were a small thing, but they were something. As Japan rebuilt, Nintendo found new ways to grow. By the 1950s, the country was moving fast. Television flickered in shop windows. Kids pressed their faces to the glass to see the new world coming to life. Nintendo kept pace, printing cards not just for gambling halls, but for family game nights. They signed deals to make Disney-themed cards, blending Western icons with Japanese tradition. Mickey Mouse sharing space with Hanafuda flowers. It was a smart move, one that opened doors and made Nintendo's name familiar to a whole new generation. These decades were a time of transformation. From the small shop in Kyoto, Nintendo had become a company with reach across Japan. Still, its focus was simple, making something people could hold in their hands, shuffle, and play. It was about connection, a flicker of joy shared across a wooden table. Looking back, it's clear that Nintendo's roots were built on more than luck. They were built on craft, on the quiet promise that games, even simple ones, matter. They bring people together. They offer a break from the worries of the world. In the cards Fusajiro painted, in every shuffle and deal, there was the hint of something bigger waiting to grow. Because Nintendo was never just about cards. It was about possibility. And soon, that possibility would move beyond paper and ink, into a world of light, screens, and the games that would define generations. This was the humble start of Nintendo, a small workshop in Kyoto, a deck of cards in a gambler's hand, and the quiet beginning of a company that would one day change how the world plays. Chapter 2: From Toys to Consoles, the 1960s-1970s. As Japan entered the 1960s, Nintendo was ready for something new. The world was changing fast. Television was everywhere. Pop culture was exploding, and people craved new ways to be entertained. The humble playing card couldn't hold center stage forever. So Nintendo turned its gaze outward, ready to reinvent itself. In 1963, Nintendo's leadership under Hiroshi Yamauchi, the grandson of Sekiro, decided to expand beyond cards. Yamauchi saw what others didn't. Games could be more than cards. They could be toys, amusement machines, anything that sparked curiosity and fun. Nintendo tried everything. They made instant rice, Ninten rice they called it, a quick meal for busy families. They even tried running a taxi service and opening love hotels in Osaka's neon-lit districts. Most of these experiments didn't last, but they taught Nintendo a valuable lesson. Focus on what you do best, entertainment. One early success was the Ultra Hand, a toy with extendable arms that let kids grab things from across the room. It was simple, clever and a hit across Japan. Nintendo followed up with other toys, like the Ultra Machine, a baseball toy that fired soft plastic balls for kids to hit. Each invention was a small spark, proving that Nintendo's future wasn't just about cards, it was about play itself. By the late 1960s, Nintendo was still a toy company at heart, but it had started to see the future in electronics. The world was buzzing with new technology: color TVs, transistor radios, and early video games like Pong in American arcades. In Kyoto, a young Nintendo engineer named Gunpei Yokoi was tinkering with ideas that would change everything. Yokoi was a thinker, curious and precise. He believed that fun didn't need cutting-edge tech. It needed imagination. He created the Love Tester, a small handheld device that supposedly measured the chemistry between two people. It was playful, a little silly, and people loved it. More importantly, it taught Nintendo that the right mix of electronics and creativity could spark something bigger. As the 1970s dawned, that spark caught fire. Nintendo started making light gun games, small shooting galleries you could play at home or in small arcades. They were called laser clay shooting systems, and they turned empty bowling alleys into shooting ranges. It was a perfect blend of tradition and technology, something old and new at once. Hiroshi Yamauchi saw the potential in these experiments. He gave Yokoi the green light to explore, to keep pushing the limits of what play could be. Yokoi, always practical, always inventive, kept refining his ideas, until in 1977, Nintendo released its first home video game console, the Color TV game. The Color TV game wasn't fancy. It played a handful of simple games, Pong clones mostly, but it was enough to plant a seed. For the first time, Nintendo wasn't just making things to hold in your hands. They were making worlds to step into, even if those worlds were just bouncing white pixels on a screen. That same year, Nintendo partnered with Mitsubishi to produce these early consoles. The work was small, almost cautious. No one could guess how far it would go. But in those first consoles, you could feel the start of something bigger, a sense that games were more than cards or toys. They were a window to something entirely new. As the decade closed, Nintendo stood at the edge of a new frontier. The card decks of Kyoto were still there, but they'd become part of something much bigger. From wooden toys to plastic light guns, from hand-painted Hanafuda to bright TV screens, Nintendo was proving that play itself could evolve. All it took was curiosity, courage, and a belief that games would always find a place in the hearts of people, no matter how the world changed. In the next chapter, Nintendo would take its biggest leap yet, a leap that would bring characters like Donkey Kong and Mario to life, and set the stage for the company's greatest adventures. Chapter 3: The Famicom and the NES, 1980s Revolution. The 1980s began with a new energy. Nintendo had already shifted from playing cards and toys to simple electronic games. But Hiroshi Yamauchi had bigger plans. He wanted Nintendo to take center stage in this new world of digital play. In 1983, Nintendo launched the family computer in Japan, known as the Famicom. It was a small plastic console with bright red and cream colors. Nothing fancy to look at, but it changed everything. The Famicom was simple, affordable, and easy to hook up to a TV. It let families play together, turning living rooms into game rooms. At first, the Famicom had basic games, tennis, baseball, simple shooters. But it didn't take long for something bigger to arrive. In 1984, a young game designer named Shigeru Miyamoto created Donkey Kong, a game about a plumber in red overalls climbing ladders and jumping barrels to save his girlfriend. That plumber's name? Mario. Donkey Kong was a hit in arcades, and the Famicom brought Mario's adventure into Japanese homes. The character was simple, but he was brave, determined, and instantly iconic. He wasn't just a video game sprite. He was a symbol of Nintendo's new vision. Meanwhile, in America, the video game industry was in crisis. Arcade cabinets had boomed in the late 70s, but home consoles like the Atari 2600 had flooded the market with low-quality games. By 1983, the industry had crashed. Stores were filled with unsold games and unsold dreams. It seemed like video games were just a fad that had burned too hot and too fast. But Hiroshi Yamauchi believed there was still magic in games, if they were done right. Nintendo took a chance and decided to bring the Famicom to America. They gave it a new name, the Nintendo Entertainment System, NES for short. They gave it a new look too, with a gray, boxy style that looked like a piece of high-tech stereo equipment. And they added something simple but powerful, a little sticker that said Nintendo Seal of Quality. No more cheap games, no more broken promises. The NES would only offer games worth playing. In 1985, the NES launched in America with a small library of games. But one of them would define a generation. Super Mario Bros. For the first time, players could guide Mario through colorful worlds, bouncing over turtles and hopping down green pipes. The music was catchy, the controls were tight, and the sense of discovery was endless. It was more than a game, it was an adventure. The NES didn't just save Nintendo. It saved the entire industry. Kids crowded around TVs in basements and living rooms, trading secrets about hidden power-ups and warp zones. Mario wasn't just a plumber, he was a passport to a new world. Nintendo followed up with more classics, The Legend of Zelda, Metroid, and games that pushed the limits of what a home console could be. Each one was different, but they all carried the same promise, that games could be more than a way to pass the time. They could be worlds of wonder, places to explore, stories to get lost in. By the end of the 1980s, Nintendo was everywhere, in the hands of kids, in the ads on TV, in the bright pixels of arcade screens. The Famicom and the NES had turned Nintendo from a small Kyoto card company into the leader of a new industry. An industry built on fun, creativity, and a little plumber in red overalls. This was just the start. Nintendo had proven that video games weren't a fad. They were the future. And in the next decade, that future would only grow bigger and brighter. Chapter 4: The Handheld Game Boy Era. By the late 1980s, Nintendo had conquered the living room with the NES. But one of the company's brightest minds, Gunpei Yoko, believed that gaming didn't have to be tied to a TV. He wanted to take games out of the living room and put them right in your hands. That dream became reality in 1989 when Nintendo released the Game Boy. It was a small, gray brick of a device. No color, no fancy graphics. Just a simple black and white screen, a D-pad, 2 red buttons, and the promise of play wherever you were. At first, people weren't sure. Why would anyone want to play on a tiny screen when the NES had full color and big worlds? But Yoko knew what he was doing. The Game Boy was tough. It could survive being dropped in a backpack or stuffed in a back pocket. And it was simple enough to let anyone pick it up and start playing. It launched with a game that seemed small and quiet, but would become a legend: Tetris. The puzzle blocks fell, line by line, and players couldn't put it down. Tetris didn't need bright colors or fancy animations, just that endless, addictive challenge that kept you coming back. The Game Boy wasn't just for Tetris. Nintendo knew they needed a mascot to go with it. So in 1996, they gave the world something new: Pokémon. Red and green in Japan, red and blue in America. Suddenly, kids everywhere were catching creatures, trading them at lunch, and dreaming of becoming Pokémon masters. The Game Boy became more than a toy. It was a passport to an entire world of battles, friends, and tiny digital monsters that felt real. The simplicity of the Game Boy was its secret strength. Other companies tried to compete with more advanced handhelds, full color, faster chips, but Nintendo's handheld was reliable, affordable, and fun. And it didn't chew through batteries as quickly as its competitors. It also kept evolving. Nintendo released the Game Boy Pocket, a slimmer, sharper version. Then the Game Boy Color, adding color screens and making old favorites feel fresh again. But at its core, the Game Boy stayed the same. Simple controls, sturdy build, and a library of games that felt endless. By the late 1990s, the Game Boy wasn't just a device, it was a companion. On car rides, in schoolyards, under the covers at night, kids clicked those buttons and lost themselves in tiny worlds. The Game Boy had turned gaming into something personal, something you could hold in your hand and carry with you wherever you went. It was a new kind of freedom, and it proved that no matter how far technology advanced, the heart of a game was still the same. The thrill of play, the joy of discovery, and the promise of a little world in your pocket. Nintendo had changed gaming once with the NES. Now, with the Game Boy, they changed it all over again. Not in the living room this time, but in every kid's backpack, every pocket, every playground in the world. The future was handheld, and Nintendo was leading the way. Chapter 5: The Super Nintendo and the 16-bit Boom. By the early 1990s, video games were moving fast. The NES had shown the world that home gaming was more than a passing fad, but technology didn't stand still. New consoles were coming, with bigger, brighter worlds waiting to be explored. In 1990, Nintendo released the Super Famicom in Japan, and in 1991, it arrived in North America as the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, the SNES. It was a sleek gray box with smooth curves, and inside, it had the power to bring 16-bit graphics and richer sound to life. For players, the jump was immediate. Suddenly, Mario's worlds had depth and color, lush green hills, bright blue skies, and music that felt like a real adventure. Games weren't just simple challenges anymore. They were stories, journeys you could feel as much as play. Super Mario World was the first big hit, a game that took everything players loved about Mario and made it bigger, brighter, better. New power-ups, new secrets, and Yoshi, Mario's dinosaur sidekick, who quickly became a fan favorite. The SNES also gave players games that felt like epic quests. The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past was a sprawling adventure through forests, temples, and hidden dungeons. It had puzzles and battles, light and shadow, a journey that pushed what video games could be. Then there was Super Metroid, a lonely journey across an alien world. It was dark, tense, and moody, a different kind of story that showed games could be atmospheric and mature. Nintendo's new console wasn't just a step up in graphics and sound. It was a statement. Games were an art form, and Nintendo knew how to make them sing. But the 16-bit era wasn't just Nintendo's story. Sega entered the fight with the Genesis, bringing Sonic the Hedgehog and a faster, edgier style. The console wars had begun, and kids everywhere argued over who was better, Mario or Sonic, SNES or Genesis. Through it all, Nintendo focused on what it did best, crafting games that were polished, fun, and full of heart. They built partnerships with game makers like Square, who brought out Final Fantasy titles that turned games into sprawling epics, and Capcom, whose Street Fighter II battles turned living rooms into arcades. The SNES was a system of firsts. The first time many players felt truly lost in a game's world. The first time music and story came together in ways that felt bigger than the sum of their parts. Even today, those games hold up, proof that Nintendo's careful craft could outlast the fads of the moment. By the mid-90s, the world was already looking ahead. New consoles, new ideas. But the SNES had done its job. It proved that games could be more than a pastime. They could be art, memory, and magic all in one. Nintendo had leveled up once again, and they weren't done yet. Chapter 6: The N64 and the Dawn of 3D Gaming. The mid-1990s were a turning point for video games. The 2D worlds that had captured players' imaginations were about to give way to something bigger. A new era where games weren't just played on a flat screen, but stepped into like never before. In 1996, Nintendo launched the Nintendo 64, known to fans as the N64. It was a bold, angular console built to take players into a new dimension, 3D gaming. One of its first titles wasn't just a hit, it was a revolution. Super Mario 64. For the first time, Mario didn't just run left and right. He ran forward, backward, and in every direction, exploring open worlds that felt alive and limitless. From the moment you stepped into Peach's castle, the world was yours to roam, and that freedom changed everything. The N64 wasn't just about Mario. It gave players The Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, a game that blended story, music, and exploration into an experience that felt bigger than the sum of its parts. Players traveled through Hyrule as a young hero, played magical songs on the ocarina, and battled to save a world full of secrets. The controller itself was different, a three-pronged design with a thumbstick in the middle. At first, it looked strange, but it was perfect for 3D movement, letting players feel like they were really part of the game world. The N64's graphics were cutting edge at the time, but it wasn't just about looks. It was about what those new graphics made possible. Worlds that felt real, spaces that felt deep and worth exploring. For many, it was the first time a game felt like a place, not just a puzzle. The console brought friends together too. The N64 had 4 controller ports, no need for extra adapters. Games like Mario Kart 64 and GoldenEye 007 turned living rooms into battlegrounds of laughter and friendly rivalry. It was a time when you didn't just play games alone, you shared them side by side in person. Nintendo also took risks. From the quirky Pokémon Snap, where you took pictures of creatures in the wild, to the intense Super Smash Bros., which turned Nintendo's beloved characters into brawlers in colorful arenas. Even as Sony's PlayStation was making waves with discs and a different style, the N64 stood for something unique: the power of play, the magic of friendship, and the thrill of seeing a game world from every angle. By the end of the 1990s, Nintendo had proven that 3D wasn't just a gimmick, it was the future. The N64's worlds weren't perfect. There were jagged edges and fuzzy textures, but what mattered was how they felt: alive, open, and brimming with possibility.
Chapter 7: GameCube to the Wii, a quirky leap. As the 2000s began, Nintendo faced a new challenge: how to keep moving forward when gaming was growing bigger, flashier, and more competitive than ever. In 2001, they released the Nintendo GameCube, a small, boxy console that came in playful colors like indigo and orange. It wasn't as powerful as Sony's PlayStation 2 or Microsoft's new Xbox, but it had something else: Nintendo's signature creativity. The GameCube was home to bright, vibrant games. Super Smash Bros. Melee turned Nintendo's most famous characters into fierce fighters. Luigi's Mansion gave Mario's timid brother a chance to shine in a haunted house adventure. And The Legend of Zelda: The Wind Waker took a bold step, trading realism for a beautiful cel-shaded art style that looked like a moving painting. The controller was simple and comfortable, designed for fun, not flash. And while it never sold as much as the competition, the GameCube became a beloved system, a place for players who wanted something different from the usual gray, realistic worlds. But Nintendo wasn't content to stay in second place. They wanted to do more than just compete. They wanted to change the way people thought about gaming. In 2006, they did exactly that. They released the Wii, a console that didn't just update the graphics, it updated how you played. Gone was the old controller. In its place, the Wii Remote, a motion-sensitive wand that turned your living room into a tennis court, a golf green, or a dance floor. The Wii was a revolution. For the first time, anyone could pick up a controller and play. Grandparents, kids, parents, everyone could join in. Games like Wii Sports showed that play didn't have to be complicated to be fun. A flick of the wrist, a gentle swing, and you were part of the game. The Wii's library was a mix of the old and the new. Super Mario Galaxy took Mario to new heights, while The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess gave players a sweeping adventure in a dark, beautiful world. But it was the system's simplicity and inclusivity that made it a hit. The Wii didn't chase the same audience as the PlayStation 3 or Xbox 360. Instead, it invited everyone to join in. From family game nights to late-night bowling competitions in dorm rooms. By the end of its life, the Wii had sold over 100 million units, proving that sometimes the best way to move forward is to look sideways, to find new ways to play that no one else imagined. Nintendo had done it again. Not by following the trends, but by setting them. From the quirky GameCube to the motion-controlled magic of the Wii, they showed that gaming was for everyone, and that play could be as simple and as joyful as a wave of the hand.
Chapter 8: The Handheld Powerhouse, DS and 3DS. While the Wii was bringing families together in living rooms, Nintendo was also making sure the magic of gaming could travel anywhere, fitting right into the palm of your hand. In 2004, they released the Nintendo DS, a handheld console that didn't look like anything that came before it. Two screens stacked on top of each other, one of them touch-sensitive, a bold idea in a time when most screens only showed you what to do, not asked you to reach out and touch. At first, people were skeptical. Could touchscreens really make games better? Nintendo had the answer: yes. The DS's touchscreen turned games into something tactile, something you could draw on, tap, and slide, blurring the line between player and game. The DS had a library that was just as bold. Brain Age invited everyone to test their mental skills. Nintendogs let kids adopt a virtual pet and care for it with gentle taps. And of course, Mario and Pokémon found new homes on the dual screens, proving that even the classics could learn new tricks. The DS was more than a system. It was a new way to play. It sold over 150 million units worldwide, becoming the second best-selling game system of all time. That's more than numbers. It's a testament to Nintendo's ability to turn curiosity into success. But they didn't stop there. In 2011, they took the idea of handheld play even further with the Nintendo 3DS, a system that didn't need glasses to bring its games into 3 dimensions. The 3DS's screens could add depth to everything from Mario's jumps to Link's sword swings, a small tweak that made a big difference. Games felt deeper, richer, like you could reach into the screen and touch the adventure yourself. The 3DS built on the DS's strengths: dual screens, portability, and a library of games that stretched from new experiments to old favorites reborn. It had its own hits too. Animal Crossing New Leaf turned villages into quiet havens of play. Fire Emblem Awakening brought strategy and story together in ways that hooked players for hours. The DS and 3DS proved that power wasn't just about graphics or speed. It was about creativity, finding new ways to tell stories and share moments no matter where you were. As phones and tablets rose to challenge handheld gaming, Nintendo systems kept their place, not because they were the most advanced, but because they felt the most alive. They were a friend in your pocket, a world to escape to on a long bus ride, a little screen with big dreams. From the flick of a stylus to the quiet glow of a backlit screen, Nintendo showed that the smallest systems could still hold the biggest adventures. Chapter 9: The Wii U Stumble and the Switch Surprise. After the massive success of the Wii, Nintendo wanted to keep pushing forward. In 2012, they launched the Wii U, a console that looked familiar but had something new. A tablet-like controller with its own screen, the gamepad. It was a bold idea, but it didn't connect the way Nintendo hoped. The Wii U's message was confusing. Was it an add-on for the Wii? A new system? Players weren't sure, and developers didn't always see how to use its second screen. Sales never took off like the Wii had. For the first time in years, Nintendo seemed to be searching for its next step. But even in this stumble, there were bright spots. The Wii U had some of Nintendo's most creative games. Splatoon turned team battles into colorful splashes of paint. Mario Kart 8 refined everything fun about racing. Super Mario 3D World blended classic ideas with new tricks. And despite the struggles, players who owned the system found a lot to love. Still, Nintendo knew they needed something new, something that could bring the best of console and handheld play together. They found the answer in 2017 with the Nintendo Switch. The Switch was simple but brilliant. A console you could play at home, then lift out of its dock and take anywhere. One seamless experience, no matter where you were. It was a hybrid that gave players freedom. No more choosing between big screen gaming and playing on the go. The Switch launched with The Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild, a game that redefined open-world adventures. Players could climb any mountain, cook over campfires, and forge their own path through a kingdom in ruins. It wasn't just another Zelda. It was a quiet revolution that felt like the future of games. The Switch also gave fans new ways to play old favorites. Super Mario Odyssey took Mario around the world, while Animal Crossing New Horizons became a place of comfort and community for millions. Even the old classics got a new life, with ports and remakes that found fresh fans in a new generation. Nintendo's stumble with the Wii U didn't hold them back. It pushed them to think differently, to find a new way to bring players together. The Switch became a symbol of what Nintendo does best, taking big risks and turning them into something magical. By 2025, the Switch had become one of Nintendo's best-selling systems, proving that even after decades in the game, Nintendo still had surprises left. And with the Switch 2 on the horizon, they were ready to write the next chapter in a story that's always been about one thing: the joy of play.
Chapter 10. The Switch 2. A new chapter begins. Now, in 2025, Nintendo stands at the edge of another chapter in its long journey. The Switch 2 is on the horizon, promising new technology, new ideas, and a fresh way to bring players together. Details are still a secret, as they always are with Nintendo. But fans around the world are already dreaming of brighter screens, smoother games, and the next adventure that will make them smile. The Switch 2 isn't just another console. It's a chance for Nintendo to prove again that games are more than just entertainment. They're memories waiting to be made, friendships waiting to be shared, and little worlds that can turn a quiet evening into something unforgettable. As always, Nintendo's strength is in its balance, respecting the past while reaching for the future. The Switch 2 will carry forward the lessons of the Game Boy and DS, the magic of the NES and SNES, the spirit of Mario, Zelda, and Pokémon, and the quiet promise that play is for everyone, no matter where you are. It's easy to forget that this company once began with a simple deck of playing cards, painted by hand in a Kyoto workshop in 1889. Or that every console, every game, every bright-eyed character came from the same place: a love for play and a belief that games can bring us closer to the wonder of being human. Today, Nintendo's story is far from over. With each new console, they invite us to step back into that world of possibility, to find laughter, challenge, and surprise in every press of a button. The Switch 2 isn't just a new device. It's a promise that the magic of games will keep growing, and that the next chapter will be every bit as bright as the last. Nintendo's journey is a story still unfolding, and in every pixel and every smile, you can feel the echo of that first hand-painted card, the quiet wish to bring joy to the world, one game at a time.